What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the Humble Marksman channel. If you like handguns, competition, and over-analysis, then please consider subscribing to the channel. So on deck today, we're going to compare a CZ Shadow 1 versus a Shadow 2. I picked up the Shadow 2 about a week, just over a week ago or so at this point, and starting to begin to over-analyze it like you guys like and get into it. So I just wanted to go through what some of the differences are. I've seen a lot of posts on forums talking about, is the Shadow 2 really worth it, since these can be found between $1,100 and $1,300 depending on how you shop, and these can be found online, or if you can find them at all, they're about $900. If you get the tuned up versions, they're right at $1,300. So is the difference worth it? I'm going to go ahead and ruin that for you and just say yes, this is the finest 9mm pistol I think I've ever shot. It is that good. That is not hyperbole, it just blows me away. But that's for the other review. So jumping in, for the purposes of this review, these are set up the same. This is my old SP01 practice gun with the LOK palmswells grips. I've got the same going on this guy here. So as far, you can probably already tell dimensionally, this is about a 5-inch gun and this is about a 4.5-inch gun. There's a little bit more sight radius, which is useful in practical pistol shooting. So the advantages there should be pretty self-evident. This is going to yield slightly faster ammo, which means you don't have to use you don't have to use factory ammo. You can use less powder in your ammo when you're making power factor, which is nice. The frame is 1/10 of an inch wider. I don't know how well that's going to come across. I'll throw in a photo so you can see. So this is about 1 inch across, and this is about 1.1 inches across, if I recall correctly. So you can see that there. You've got a full pick rail, whereas you've got a 1-slot rail right there on the Shadow 2. And really, I'm not sure what this is for. I guess if 3-gun guys want to use a light, or if you're going to chrono your ammunition using something like a magneto speed chrono that hooks onto the rail. I guess that's what that's there for, but it doesn't need a full rail because that's not the purpose of the gun. If you haven't put it together yet, it is a competition gun. I'm not even going to say it's just a nice shooter. It is a competition gun. You should use it for competition. If you're not competing, consider competing. So the frame's 1/10 of an inch wider, and where you kind of notice that, similar to the P01, you can see right here there's a line on the frame as the thickness of the frame tapers back down to be the same size across the grip as the SP01 and traditional 75 pistols. So while it is wider at the muzzle end, it's the same thickness across on the grip. So side to side, these grips are going to be identical feeling in the hand. The grip is also 1/10 of an inch longer front to back, which means the sculpt for the grip tang is going to be different. It's significantly more relieved at the back of the Shadow 2, and it also allows you to get a little bit higher up, and it's the same thing on the trigger guard. It's going to let you get a little bit higher up. There's a little bit more material kind of removed right there, giving you a little bit better access getting up under the gun. So they feel similar in hand, but not same as. And how that most manifests is if you're like a typical American who's larger than old Eastern Europeans with smaller hands, where that manifests is as you're gripping the gun. So I'm just going to exaggerate this, but with an old style SP01, I feel like I have to kind of rotate around the back of it to get a good grip and really get behind the gun. The new SP01, it's just long enough, or the new Shadow 2, I should say, is just long enough that it allows you to kind of come off and grip it like a more traditional pistol, more like a 1911, and it makes a difference. It affects how your trigger finger interfaces with the trigger. I'm more consistent almost out of the box, almost immediately with the Shadow 2 than I was with the Shadow 1. For people not familiar with the channel, I've been shooting the Shadow 1s in competition for nearly 2 years at this point. My average round count's about 1,500 rounds a month, and I dry fire at least 30 minutes every day. So I've got a lot of time with this frame in my hands, and this frame is significantly better. So jumping on to the ergos, some other types of things. You can see the paddle style mag release you've got on the Shadow 2 versus just the D-style extended mag release on the Shadow 1. It's pretty nice. I prefer this. Shooting offhand, this does kind of get in the way. Since I get to have it, I like it, but that one works fine too. It's not a huge advantage, but there it is. While we're on the topic of the grip area, let's look at the front strap and honestly the back strap. I'm not going to pick it up and show you, I'll just fly in with a picture. So the Shadow 2 has a cast-in set of checkering, which actually does a pretty good job of biting you back and really stays planted in your hand. Married with the LOK the LOK Palmswell Bogie grips, the gun doesn't budge in your hand. I don't have to use Pro Grip or anything like that because the gun doesn't move. Whereas on the SP01 Shadow, you just have this really weak, pathetic attempt at checkering on the front and back strap just so they could put in the marketing materials that the front and back strap are checkered. It's a really poor attempt. A lot of people put skate tape on the front and back straps of the gun. When I got this gun, it actually had skate tape on the front and back straps. It was just not something I cared to maintain, so I didn't keep it up. So the other thing, while we're talking about grips, and these come with contoured rubber grips, which are nice. They feel good. The rubber's a little bit flexible, so I prefer the LOK Palmswell grips, which mimic the profile of the OEM rubber grips. Whereas these come with thin aluminum grips, which take really awesome photographs and look amazing, but really don't do much in providing traction on the gun. And honestly, it makes the gun feel too thin. It feels almost like a Glock with the really thin grips on it, which I don't particularly care for. With the Palmswell, if you get these Palmswells on the gun, you will be amazed at how ergonomic this gun fits in the hand. Significantly better due to the frame cuts and how the grip is just long enough to make it a little bit nicer. So it's almost like a large frame Tanfo at this point. So the other thing that's a nice feature on the Shadow 2 is the flush fitting safeties. So the reason these come with flush safeties is because while this is a double single gun, you guys who don't shoot competition don't realize this is a production division gun, which means you have to start with the hammer fully decocked. Yes, you can cock and lock it, but it's not a realistic choice for starting this gun in competition. You can do single action starts on your own, that's fine, do whatever you like, and they give you extended safeties that fit on this. Whereas the SP01 Shadow came with really bad extended safeties, I might add. They were an unfortunate shape. They weren't really well positioned to fall under the pad of your thumb like a 1911 safety. They were way too easy to actuate. They weren't great safeties. So a lot of people taking this gun seriously, using it in competition, got these flush fitting safeties fit onto the pistol, which is about another $100 just for the part. And if you have to pay a gunsmith, whatever that costs, or you can fit it yourself, because they don't come fit. You have to grind this down a little bit. So the flush safeties are nice, and it comes with the extended safeties should you decide you like resting your thumb on the safety or you do want to use it single action for your purposes. So that is available to you. The trigger is an old style 85 combat trigger, which you can see is a little bit fatter than the new style 85 combat that ships on the Shadow 1s. A lot of people prefer, there's a little bit less recurve on this trigger than there is with this. I'm actually starting to prefer this now that I've had some time behind it. I don't know that I'm going to go crazy and put these on all of my CZ75 style guns, but it adds a little bit of trigger reach to the trigger. It feels like not very much, just a little, because it's a little bit, the curve is not as pronounced. So I actually think I prefer that. So probably will start upgrading my other CZs to have that trigger. The slide cuts are very different. You can see the drama going on with the forecuts. They've actually been moved forward a good bit to be at the front sight, and the rear cuts were extended a good bit. So these cuts are significantly more functional. These cuts might as well not even be there. When you actually go to do do a manipulation on the slide like that, you don't even get on there. It kind of grabs you on this side where I'm getting it, so I'm not really getting much from those cuts being there. Whereas with these, it grabs you back. Like, you will not miss that. I mean, if you hit this wrong or your hands are wet, I could see this potentially taking skin off. It's that aggressive, which is fantastic for what we're doing with these things. So you can just kind of see how the extractor looks. It looks like the extractor is the same size. I haven't taped it out and mic'd it because I really don't care enough about it, but it looks similar as far as the extractor parts are concerned. All right, so the other controls that have changed, I'm told that these slide stops are slightly different. This is more like the P01 slide stop, and you can actually look, you can see this little vertical shelf right there for the SP01 slide stop versus it being flush. So you can replace this with a P01 slide stop and not the SP01 slide stop. So that's a different part, not that it really matters, it's just worth noting. The other thing you'll probably notice is the hammer shape. So this is an aftermarket hammer. This is the competition hammer from CZ, and the stock hammer would just be the ring hammer. It's a wide ring hammer, whereas you've got this triangular hammer here. I think that that's probably a wash between the two models. The comp hammer is nicer. It provides a nicer wall than the triangular hammer, but honestly, the triangular hammer is not bad. If I really go crazy and want just a bullseye accurate gun one day, maybe I'll consider swapping over to a comp hammer, but I don't have $70 just burning a hole in my pocket after buying an expensive gun, so I'll just leave it stock for the time being. All right, so the adjustable sight is a nice feature. So the adjustable sight is a height-only adjustable sight. There are 2 set screws securing it in place, so you shouldn't get any shift left to right. Out of your sight, you can just adjust it up and down. The front sight is a different sight height than the SP01 as well. So I imagine if you wanted to use this rear sight on your SP01, I'm not sure that the slide cut, because I haven't taken the sight off and looked, I'm not sure the slide cut is the same. I know that the P10C shares a slide cut with the Shadow 2, so any sights that will work on a Shadow 2 should work on the P10C, which is a neat feature. So maybe all the new models of CZs are going to be migrating that way. All right, and so jumping into kind of the internal stuff, I'm not going to take the guns apart, try and show you on camera. I took some photos off camera, but the slide on the CZ75 has had some lightning cuts done to it, specifically down here in the dust cover. They kind of wallowed it out. The milling is pretty similar inside. The actual slide profiles are different, whereas basically, if this is my frame right there, the Shadow 1 comes up and then, like a traditional gun, kind of does this. The Shadow 2 is basically like a triangle that comes up like this, leaving the gun, so that all of the weight of the slide is down here at the rail, at the bore. So it's shifting all of the weight of the reciprocating mass down to the bore center line, which makes it easier to control. It's taking leverage away from the top of the slide as it slides back, so it's not going to lift up as much. And it's very noticeable shooting these. The Shadow 2 has less sight lift, and you can see that in the slow motion video I'll put at the end of the video, so stick around for that. All right, and the trigger bars are different. You can see that there's a slightly different notch at the front of the trigger bar. You can see that. I don't know what difference it means. It probably just means that you can't use the Shadow 2 trigger bar on the Shadow 1s. The sear cage looks like it's got different machining to it, which again probably means it mates with that trigger cage. I didn't pull out the whole trigger assembly to look at the disconnector to see where it was, but you can see where these triggers are sitting. The Shadow 1 has a pre-B disconnector fitted to keep it IPSC legal, and you can see it's got a little bit of wiggle before you get to the wall on the trigger, and the Shadow 2 probably has about the same amount of wiggle going back. So it's almost like it has a pre-B disconnector. It's not as good as the CZ custom short SRT trigger, whatever that stands for. It's not quite as good as that, but it's pretty good. The guide rods are different from the springs, so you can kind of see in these pictures the Shadow 1 has a just basically uniform profile guide rod that comes up, it's full length steel, comes out the front, whereas the Shadow 2 has a tapered guide rod which puts more of the weight at the back of the gun, considering it has a gigantic dust cover. That's probably a good thing that helped with balance, I don't know. The Shadow 2 does come with shock buffs, which for those of you who aren't familiar with what it is, it's a material softer than steel that you put in front of your recoil spring so that there is a little bit of give as the slide kind of bottoms out. It absorbs the recoil of the slide recoiling. Some people love them, but I don't use them because it just becomes another maintenance thing for a 9mm minor gun. That's not really all that important, so I just kind of, as soon as I got the gun, I took those out before I even shot it. So I've got a bag of them sitting in the case. Right, so the trigger return spring, they introduced a new trigger return spring with different geometry and a different metal. On the Shadow 2, it's reported to last a lot longer. My buddy who's been an early adopter who got his Shadow 2 with the first shipment that shipped, he's been using his practice gun. He's got a couple of them. And his practice gun sheared a trigger return spring after about 14,000 rounds of live fire and daily dry fire, which is not a steep departure from what it was, but it's about 20% longer life in live fire. So it's probably for a serious competition shooter who's dry firing a lot, doing a lot of live fire. You may have to change this every 6 months on your practice gun. Match gun is going to be good for a year probably. The barrel shape is different. So if you look at this photo of the two barrels, you'll notice that the little peanut carved out under the barrel is different on these two pistols. What that does, at least I hope what it does, is that it eliminates the parts breakage for the slide stop. I've heard that reported from CZ that they don't break slide pins anymore on the Shadow 2s versus the Shadow 1s. It's a wear and tear type item. You can get about 10 to 15,000 rounds out of a slide stop. So if you're running a Shadow 1, it's not a bad idea to change out your slide stop annually and just keep the old one in the bag as a spare. You can run it to failure, but I wouldn't recommend it. Just choke on the $40 and get a new one every year and call that good. As far as shooting is concerned, and this is where you guys will probably be interested to see, you can probably notice in the slow motion video that the Shadow 2 recoil is less. What you can't really tell is how it feels. The gun settles down a lot faster, probably due to the fact that the frame is 5 ounces heavier approximately. As we discussed, it's about 38.5 ounces versus a 43.1 ounce gun with no magazine. So the gun does seem to settle down faster. It doesn't, as the slide closes, the muzzle dip, I haven't even reduced the power of the recoil spring yet to combat slide dip when the slide closes. And it feels like it settles down faster. And what I mean with that is that I shoot as fast as I can see on most things, and I've noticed that I'm waiting on pulling the trigger again if I start trying to shoot this gun at the cadence of what I could see a good sight picture again with this gun. So it does seem more stable in recoil. I haven't shot a match with it yet to really see, but I imagine between the extended sight radius and the additional weight and the greater stability due to wonderful ergonomics, it's just glued to your hand, man. It's amazing. That I'll probably have a little bit better alpha count. I'm not expecting anything dramatic, but I do think it'll be a little bit better than what it was with this gun, which didn't fully fit me. The Tanfo frames fit me better, but those are basically unobtainium. Wanted to put these two on the table side by side so you guys can see them and I can give you my opinion on them. Because I recognize that these are not shelf-ready guns. So if you've made it this far, I appreciate it. Please go ahead and just smash the like button. Helps me out in the search results. The Shadow 2 full review with shooting videos and all that good stuff is probably a month out, so stay tuned for that. I'm still kind of forming my opinion on all that. But this is a great gun. It is easily worth what they're asking for it. And this gun's days are numbered, I'm afraid, as I need another Shadow 2 now. So I appreciate you guys watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Thanks, guys. Welcome back, YouTube, for another exciting review of a competition firearm. This is the Humble Marksman channel.